back here with the bunny ears, hopping over, is an award-winning journalist, fiction writer, and screenwriter. He is the reports coordinator for the Arizona Capital Times. Upon release from prison, he earned an English degree from ASU and volunteered with community organizations. His fiction has been published in So It Goes, the literary journal of the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library, and other outlets. Our illustrator is a Phoenix-based artist, writer, and performer. He graduated with a bachelor's in child development from Hope International University. Since 2010, he has published Amazing Arizona Comics, which explores Arizona history. He also runs Karaoke Fanboy Press and hosted a talk show called Phoenix Tonight. In 2018, the Phoenix New Times declared him the city's best storyteller. And lastly, our interviewer is a co-editor of the Allen Review, a journal devoted entirely to young adult literature. He also created the Books for Adolescent pages of the Journal of Adult and Adolescent Literacy. He is the author of several books that focus on teaching young adults and cowboy poetry. He has also published over 60 interviews with poets and authors of young adult literature in over 100 book reviews. Everyone, please welcome Jeffrey Kronenfeld, Russ Kazmierzak, and Dr. James Blondin.
I have 3 thank yous that I want to make. I want to thank my wife, Lori, for bringing me here. And I also want to thank Corey Wells and Rosemary Dombrowski for the work that they do out in the world. It is life-changing and life-saving. And God bless you. Oh my gosh, Art Spiegelman, cats and mice. In mouse, but you chose dogs. What makes dogs so perfect for this story? This is for both of us.
I might start if that's okay, Russ.
I think that's fair.
If you don't mind. I guess it all started as kind of like almost like a pound metaphor, you know, and when I was in prison, they used to do tours of civilians, as we called them, and they'd come in and then you'd have to kind of be in your cell. They'd kind of look at you and you felt a little like a zoo animal, which isn't as good as you may have thought when you were a kid. But so you felt, you know, felt a little weird them staring at you and you try to like give them mean looks just for entertainment value, because you're just waiting to use the restroom or something, right? But then sort of the idea was to represent the dehumanization by the system and kind of like also kind of the dog-eat-dog dynamic of prison, because it's pretty, you know, it's kind of a tough place in there, and also kind of just, I figured like Americans don't really care about people, but they love dogs. They love dogs. So it just seemed like if I just told people about what I did as a human, they'd be like, ugh, but as a dog, they'd be like, oh.
From the cartoonist's perspective, comics have a rich history of notable dogs. You have your Goofy, right? You have your Crypto, the super dog, Ace, the bat hound. But Kurt, I think, will join their ranks soon enough with a more poignant message of, like Jeff said, dehumanization. But also, when you draw an animal that's anthropomorphized, like as much as that's its own character, that could also be any of us. So it's a good metaphor for not just the protagonist individually, but humanity.
There's a scholarly paper in this. Easily. Jeff?
Called Goofy and Me.
Goofy and Me.
The history of comic book dogs.
Is there already a book like that?
Yes, coming spring 2024, right here at Changing Hands by one Russ Kazmierzak Jr.
Jeff, what appeals to you about Kurt Vonnegut?
Well, I loved Slaughterhouse-Five. It's kind of an amazing book. I read it in high school. It's almost like a formative book. It's such a powerful application of irony, you know. And I love humor, and I like funny stuff. And I always feel like, you know, humor is such an important aspect of human society and really even like evolution of human intelligence, right? I feel like humor helped us survive, and it helped me survive. And I feel like it's one of the best survival skills, and it's always, I don't know, I love it when you can like laugh at yourself with other people. I feel like that's how you really bridge, you know, political, cultural gaps, to laugh at yourself. And, you know, not take yourself too seriously, but and I loved his wry humor, but there was still this really deep philosophical critique in it and complicated stuff. I mean, like, you don't normally feel bad for the Germans during World War II, but then you hear about the Dresden fire bombings, and that's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. So I don't know, and I also always heard the greatest stories about him. Like whenever people would write him, especially like teachers and kids, he'd always write them back. And then I got published by his journal of his library, and then Sophia and me got to fly out there and go to it, and it's so cool. And he's so cool. He has all the rejection letters he got framed in his library, which as a writer, it's such a amazing. I don't know, like, because he got rejected. Slaughterhouse 5 got rejected literally like 99 times before it got published. So, and I don't know, he just seems like a nice, like the grandpa of American letters, maybe.
And so it goes. This is for Russ. Phoenix New Times 2018 City's Best Storyteller.
Thank you, everybody.
As human beings, we're creatures of story. What part do you think story plays in the human experience?
Thank you for such a simple question that I can answer in a scant 30 seconds. Story is obviously the through line for history, for culture, for society. It's how we define tradition. It's in so many ways how we define relationships. For me, story is important because it transcends our, like I was saying about using a dog as a protagonist, it transcends our individual experience and puts us in a place that's both familiar and completely foreign, in some cases exotic. And it allows us to both kind of project and reflect on our experiences in the world. So comics specifically as a storytelling medium are so important to me because they combine graphic design and narrative. They speak to kind of that primitive image as language, hieroglyphic kind of thing, but then also they create this relationship between word and image that adds a layer of sophistication to both fields so that they work together in a way that is really definitive of only comics.
Interesting. Jeff, you've written in a number of different modes and you've won awards in different modes. Screenplay, writing for film, traditional story writing, sci-fi, and now sequential narrative art. But then when it came to telling this story, you chose sequential narrative art. Very personal story for you. Why?
Comics have been a part of my life since I was a kid. It was something me and my siblings, we would fight over the comic section every morning at breakfast. We just read lots of comics, kind of were raised by them like a lot of America, I guess. But back then that wasn't that cool though. But, and I don't know, it was amazing, it just like all forms of reading, it really transforms you when you get into it. So sorry. So they've been really a real personal thing for me. So they were a way to they were both an escapism, but also just a way to see all these amazing things and travel to it. And then the gutter in a comic, it's this little line that divides the panels, but then it's like an infinitude. It's like the imagination that's sort of different, say, from something that's a more spoon-fed media, like a video, right? And I guess because it was such a personal story for me like that, I know when I read graphic novels, I don't know, I read them start to finish. I love them. I literally can't make enough money to buy them fast enough to keep reading them. And I don't know, and then so it was really awesome to be able to do that, and then learning the scripting process on that side was very valuable. It ended up really helping my screenwriting because it really forces you to like visualize things in a really specific way, to think about the transitions between pages. There's a cadence to comics because you want to, like if you have a surprise, you want to put it on the top of the inside page, right? So it's a page turn, so you get a reveal. There's kind of a cadence there, and almost translates like act breaks or something in a movie. And so I really found it really helped my script writing too. And I was really glad I chose it too, because it was so awesome to be teamed here with Russ. He's been an amazing creative partner, more than an illustrator too. He helped with crafting the story and helped me through it. It was actually kind of a hard thing for me to write, because I try not to write personal stuff, but it was really good, and I felt like it really helped me kind of, move forward, I guess. So, thank you.
Someone once said that graphic novels are movies that you read. Russ, you're a graduate of Hope International University. Was it just a degree, or did you experience something there that would become an integral part of your life as an artist and historian?
I did. I experienced a friendship with a peer named Brent. I was the newspaper editor on campus. I was also the student body president at the same time, so that doesn't speak to the relationship between government and media. I don't know what it does. But only at the Christian university level, not on the national or global scale anyway. But Brent laid out the newspaper in the publications office. And I walked in with my 3.5-inch floppy, also the disc the files were on. And I said, hey, here's the first newspaper of the year. My name's Russ, I'm the editor. And he said, well, my name's Brent, I lay it out, and nice Batman shirt. I said, thanks, you too. And we started talking about Batman and comics, and I told him this crazy idea I had for a Batman story. And we would meet periodically to lay out the newspaper, because I had no experience with that kind of thing, with that kind of graphic design at the time. I was 19, and just kind of doodling as far as comics making goes at the time. So we became friends. We met for lunch one day on the weekend, and he said, hey, remember that Batman story you told me about? I said, yeah. He goes, I drew some pages. And I was like, what? And so he drew this idea I had just pitched him for a minute or two, and seeing a story that I had imagined in my head, tangible on pages like that, I just fell in love with I'd always loved comics like Jeff, but that's when I fell in love with making comics. And that would only have happened, that only happened because I went to that university and met Brent.
Jeff, what role did Iron City Magazine play in your life?
Man, a big one. I met Corey, who is a professor at ASU and the founding editor of Iron City. I'm sorry to get the title wrong, but I took her class like I was like prison was still on me when I took it. I'd only been out for a few months, and so it was really weird to go from there to like a university. And I definitely had a lot of issues. I still trying to work out there because it's it's just a little bit of a different environment, I guess. And so to have Corey there and just so supportive of me, and just to to see other. I remember we did a stuffing party in your office. And I remember there was that gentleman from New York who had done like real time. My little 2 years, I felt he'd done like 13 years in New York. So so I felt like little baby inmate next to him. And he was just such, I don't even remember his name, maybe Andrew or somebody. Was to see someone who had gone through it and gotten out the other end was just like kind of crazy, because it's mostly people who just go back in and in again and again, and it's weird, like I don't know, like anyways, yeah, you see people come and come back, and it's real sad, But Corey was just so understanding and kind and encouraging to me, and I don't know, I great class, and like a really amazing class. It really helped me kind of like, I've been trying to do the writing inside. And so then to have that encouragement and support when I got out was really, really helped shepherd me on that way. And so then Iron City, to see all these other people's writing and work as an editor, and like, it was all like the same story, I felt like, that I was trying to write. So it's, at one time it's a little defeating, but then also sort of encouraging to know, you know, there's other people dealing with it. And just the work they do, and Jeff's does too, they do amazing work to help bring the art and writing and poetry and a lot of other modes, playwriting, a bunch of stuff. And you know, for the people inside, it's like a window to life. It's like you're in a world of the dead, and you can like see light through like a deep, like if you're looking up from the bottom of an ocean or something. And so it's very, like, I can't even put into words. So meant a lot. So just thank you, Corey and Jess.
The Brutes, Sabuesos, Aryans, made up or real prison gang names?
I changed the names to protect the guilty. No, they're all based on real gangs. I don't know if I really want to name them because I don't want them to like look at my address and kill me. But it's kind of a joke. But you know, those are guys who are just like, I don't know, like, prison's weird. I almost consider it like a vestigial organ in the body politic. You know, it's like, because there's like organelles or like separate organisms that get absorbed into another cell. And prison is like ancient honor culture, still preserved. It's like face matters. And if you like try to take someone's face, they will kill you. You know, and it's like you have to fight, but it doesn't even matter if you win. Like, it's just that you hold your own. And so it's kind of awesome in a way too, I guess, because it's like to feel that camaraderie. I remember I was kind of a weirdo in prison. I'm a weirdo everywhere, I guess. But I used to do yoga on the yard, which really confused everyone. And the guard made me stop because he thought it was like kung fu or something. And clearly he'd never seen me get my ass beat because I don't know kung fu. But then when he made me stop, like all the other inmates kind of like rallied to me. There's this incredible like solidarity. I don't know, it was kind of amazing. That didn't make it into dog years. There's so much that did make it into it because it's, you know, fit 2 years and 32 pages is a lot. And I guess it's even more than 2 years. But I don't know, maybe I answered that.
Which makes me want to jump way ahead to when another inmate who's been there a lot longer, protagonist about to fight, and he says, wait, focus on your program. Fight when you must, and this too shall pass. Comment?
So we hear a lot about like random acts of violence in society, and I guess we hear less about random acts of kindness. And so you see a lot of violence in prison, but then you also see sort of like people being really kind when there's no real advantage to them for it. And it's sort of a mystery to have both of those coexisting at the same time in the same space. And there were a lot of old inmates who like gave me wisdom and were kind to me. And I'm in their debt, you know. It's like how I survived was their wisdom. And there was one old guy in particular, a guy named and now I can't remember because we renamed him in the comic, but Wayne or Dwayne, and he was an older African American gentleman who was real nice. He was just a nice guy. And we're always like, man, you shouldn't be in here for 30 years, but he was, and he'd been in and out a lot. But he was just the nicest guy. He was funny. He was always like, you know, it's amazing because some guys, it's like me, I was doing a hard time because I was all in my head and, you know, thinking about stuff, and some people, they just kind of glide through it. So it was a big lesson in life there, I think. But Dwayne, yeah, he told me a lot of stuff. That story, you know, later, I think we'll probably cover it where you guys will see where this guy kind of takes a jump. It was a story he told me, and he told me to write it, and so I did. And I don't know, and it was interesting. There was an author actually came and spoke at my prison, which was something I wanted to include, but another thing I just couldn't kind of fit into the 32 pages. It was actually now a professor at ASU, Mitchell Jackson, an awesome guy. But he came and spoke at our prison, and he knew Dwayne from back when he was in prison. And to see their reunion was like the most bittersweet thing because they were almost crying when they hugged. But then to see Mitchell, to see him in there, it was so sad, and it's kind of the bittersweet beauty of it. I don't know.
Well, let's go ahead and jump to that because the suicide story about the character named Country, and it's a story within a story here. And the inmate's has written this story, and the story is brutal but breathtaking. What effect does it have on the writer to put that story on paper? Is it cathartic, healing, trauma triggering?
So there was a thing called the quiet room, where you'd go in, and mostly people would smoke and, hook up with gay Johnny in there. So I would go in there and write in the mornings before I had to go to work, and inmates would come in and just tell me their story. It was interesting, and they had all kinds of different stories, and like beautiful, sad, horrifying, and it was interesting. They saw me writing, and they would tell it to me almost like I was like the memory of the place, which that's some memories you don't want to carry. But I would talk to Dwayne. We'd be by a window, and we'd just kind of look out the window at the free world and talk. And he told me a story where he saw it in a prison where basically it was like classic prison with these tiers and cells. And this guy got on top of this, is a little spoiler alert, and he jumped off and killed himself. And he was a friend of Wayne's. He saw him like fall, and he saw him fall and bounce and then kind of splat. But what he was telling me is all the inmates were shouting, "Do it, do it, do it," in like this mono voice, almost like in church or synagogue or something, right? Like that mono voice. And it was like kind of the most horrific thing ever. It was like people were like cheering it on. And it was just like, it's kind of a negative energy place, generally in prison, if you didn't know. But, and he told me that story, and he told me that I had to write it down. He knew I was a writer, and I needed to write it down, and so it was honestly like an honor to be able to tell that story for him. I wish I'd stayed in touch with him and knew where he was, but it's real hard, because it's just in and out, and so it was cathartic for me too, and I don't know, I wanted to show like the good and the bad, and not like, I don't know, it's just everything's so mixed in life. It's not like one or other, it's kind of messy, and so it was kind of an honor to be able to tell other folks' stories, and I honestly could see an expansion of Dog Years in the future where like it's other people's stories through the dogs talking to Kurt, because I got a lot of insane scribbles and journals and stuff.
Outstanding. Well, this is for Russ. The inmates are dogs, but some of the characters, like the prison guards and the drug dealer Kingpin, are drawn as human beings. Why is that, and what goals did you have for your illustrations of them?
Well, Jeff and I talked a lot about who would be anthropomorphized as a dog and who would be depicted as a human. I think the general idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the inmates were depicted as dogs because, like you said, the dehumanization, the outside perception. And so, in my mind, as the kind of the conduit of this concept, the guilty verdict would transform the character into the dog, the perception of the dog. So prior to that, even though we see people doing dog-like things, for lack of a better word, in the context of the story, this is how we perceive these people, they haven't been convicted, they're on the outside world. We're seeing them through Kurt's memory, not in the confinements of the prison. So in that way, they remain human. And some of the most inhumane characters are human in the book.
And that brings us right into another question of, is there a duality out there? Because there are senators and lobbyists and big wig people who are buying drugs, but they don't seem to go to prison.
So I just started growing weed in Oregon, because like just everyone smokes weed in Oregon, and And I used to work for a carpenter, and we would build grow rooms for people, and they'd be little old grandmas, and you'd be growing this huge grow room, and it was just like, you know, like when you're making like $5 an hour, it's just like, huh, you know, I mean, I'm not great at math, but I can add, right? And so then when I learned to build them, I just started building them, you know, for my friend and then for myself, and just also to say on the early question, I didn't need to like, we had thought about even I feel like what Russ said was better than anything I could say on that. But also some folks, we didn't make dogs too because we were afraid of being confusing. We jumping back in times, but I actually just want to stick with what Russ said, which is way more awesome than what Russ said. But so then I started growing weed in Oregon and started growing lots of it, and then the Oregon market was kind of glutted. And so then I started going out to the East Coast to sell it, which was crazy. So because you could get a pound for like $1,500 in Portland, and then flip it in New York for $5,500, or in DC for $6,500, $7,500, and that's a pretty big return. And so I just I kept trying to go further afield and find, because I was growing more and more weed and I just couldn't get rid of it. And so I was just packing it in bags, driving or taking the train across. Just completely crazy, honestly. And like crazy stories. I remember I walked out the first time I went to DC, I walked out of the train station. There was these two cops right in front, and this one cop lady was like, "Arrest that man!" And she pointed at me, and I was like, "Oh fuck!" But then she was just making a joke with the other cop, so I just kept walking, and it was much happier to get arrested in Oregon than DC, I'll tell you. But yeah, so then I got hooked up with this guy who was a big guy. I couldn't get him enough. I started buying for other people out there and bringing it to him. He kept wanting more and more. And he was like dating like a federal judge's daughter, and she had no idea, which is probably good if you're in that business, just keep it compartmentalized. But he sold. I heard like John Kerry, Lindsey Graham. They poof. That's what I hear. But they'd have their like pages would go buy it for them. Yeah, and so I guess Kerry probably get puffed up and go on his little private race car or whatever.
He won't drop the names of prison gangs, but
No.
politicians find weed illegally. Let's just throw that out there in the public setting.
But now it's all legal though. It's so weird to like see that flip. But no, so it was weird to be in the corridors of power there and be on like skyscraper gardens on top of skyscrapers in New York, like partying, and then be like underground. So it was an interesting dichotomy.
Do you know how similar your own story is to Jack Antos' Hole in My Life?
I do. I had a really awesome YA literature professor at ASU who actually told me that, and I read Jack Antos' book when I was in your class, Dr. B, and it was an amazing book. I mean, Gantos is way cooler than me, because he like smuggled it on a boat. He like boated it in from Florida. 2 tons. Like, that's a lot. That was huge. And he was boating it in, and he got caught by the Coast Guard, and he wrote this story, and he's really a model for me. He wrote this amazing book called Whole My Life that you should all read, and I read it. It was really amazing about, like, you know, his prison experience, very inspirational for dog years.
Oh, you know what? I'll send him dog ears.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Next time he comes to town, we'll connect. Well, you were talking about some of the older inmates, and in dog years, an older inmate's just about to go out on parole and says, after 34 God-forsaken years, I got nowhere to go and no one to see.
So that's almost like kind of about 2 different people I knew kind of combined. Like, one was this really crazy case. It was a man who was homeless outside who refused to leave. And it was so funny, he wouldn't leave the prison. And he was supposed to go out, and the guards didn't know what to do. And they're like, well, because people would get arrested in prison, which is weird. They'd call the cops, and they'd get arrested, and they'd get shipped to county, and then come back. And they're like, we're going to get you arrested. And he's like, good. And they're like, and they just left, and they were kind of talking. They didn't know what to do. It's amazing to just not do what people expect you to do. Is the most fun thing ever, I think. But and so that was kind of amazing. But then, like, some of the other inmates were going to stab him because they, you know, dream of being free every night. So then to have a guy who doesn't appreciate it was a little annoying to them. It wasn't me, but then there was another guy who was an old pot grower from Northern California who was this like irascible old guy, and he would he was bent over and he had a cane and he'd walk around real slow, and anything he'd say, he'd like put the vinegar in your piss or something. I don't think I messed that up. But he was awesome though. I loved him. He was hilarious. And he had gotten arrested. It was the craziest story. He was just filling up his gas at a gas station. He had a truck just full of weed, like a lot, like Gantos levels. And that truck hit him when he was parked. And then he probably died in prison, honestly, because he was really, really, really old. And so it's kind of a combination of both those guys. There was something I wanted to mention earlier, though, that I didn't get to cover on the suicide question. There is, I don't know if any of you have your comic. I'm going to direct you to open it to a certain page. So one professor we haven't, a couple professors we haven't thanked yet. But you go near the end of the book. This is where country kind of takes the jump. You see up here, there's I took part in a writing workshop when I was in prison, or actually in jail, by an organization called Right Around Portland, and it resulted in my first published story, which is this weird sci-fi story called Blood Dust. And it was a result of that workshop when I was in jail, and it was really a big moment for me because I was in jail like 5 months, but man, those 5 months felt like a year. Those are the worst, like even worse than prison actually, a lot of the county lockups around the country. And that workshop was really formative. I ended up shifting it back further in the timeline of the story, just for narrative purposes. But we did, Russ and I were connected by Rosemary Dabrowski, Phoenix's inaugural poet laureate, connected us for this project. I told her I was working on. She's like, I heard Russ is looking for work, and it was the best connection ever because Russ is like a creative part, almost a little mentor. I mean, you're very it was a very hard story for me to write, and to have you there and kind of gently shepherd me through it really was really, I really appreciate it. And Sophia too, of course, carried a lot of that. But RD helped connect us, and RD worked with people in a prison doing writing. So we immortalized her, even though she wasn't in my writing workshop. She did writing workshops, so we immortalized her here on the page. And we haven't told her till now, and I've been really excited. I'm bad at keeping secrets, so. Oh, look up. She's amazing. Sophia, look at that. So she's up in the middle, and so you're in there, RD, so we want to tell you. So. Anyways,
It looks just like you. It looks just like you.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Amazing. So happy that I could bring these two creative geniuses together.
The only two gingers she knows.
What a matchmaker I got. Yes.
Well, that brings us back to Russ, whose inking is brilliant. Sometimes we see a character in total shadow. Sometimes we see them from above, from below. You're communicating a lot to the reader in frames, maybe even subconsciously. How do you learn to do that?
I would say I'm still learning to do that, of course. Let's see, when you convey a story as a comic, you are, comic book artists say this all the time. They're directors of a film, or the principal photography, cinematography, and stuff. You can frame an image. You have no budget, so you can put the camera inside of a character's mouth and line that panel with teeth, and you're looking at somebody through somebody's gullet or something like that. There's no limit to where the camera could be, where you could put the reader's perspective. So with a story like this that takes place, with the exception of flashbacks, in a single setting, it's absolutely important to move the camera around as much as possible to give the reader as much variety visually as you can. And it was a challenge. I draw my own comic that I write, so I set my own very limited expectations of what I can draw. To draw somebody else's script was a great responsibility, and I wanted to take it as seriously as I could, push my own limits as a cartoonist. And the relationship is very symbiotic and mutual as far as the mentorship and the encouragement and the inspiration.
You've talked about anthropomorphizing the dogs, and when you look at a dog character that you've drawn, there's no doubt what that character is feeling in the moment, what that character's personality is. But it's a dog. How do you do that?
I toured the alleys of Phoenix and studied as many stray dogs. No, I basically just drew from, no pun intended, my love of comics as far as the expressionism that kind of transcends, again, human characters. One of my favorite, on my Mount Rushmore of comic books and characters, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those are 4 characters that all look pretty much exactly the same, and yet we know who each of them are based on personality and in some cases expression and so on. So there's kind of this internalized vernacular for such a thing. Cartoonists implement it, readers know it. I think it speaks to the primal nature of comics. It's just something we all totally understand that I don't know if it can be thoroughly explored.
I keep expecting Jeff's ears to do what our dog's ears do, to express emotion. Jeff, it seems like everything is stacked against the parolee once they get outside. Is it?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty tough. There's like so much there's a lot of structural impediments, I think is what they call that in kind of the community that speaks about that. So when you get out, it's not like in a movie where Brad Pitt's waiting in a limousine and you have a suit. No, it's not like that. You are wearing ill-fitting clothes and they give you a bus pass. Exactly. No Julia Roberts, no. And so you get out, and then you think kind of you're free, right? I remember when I was in there, I was so excited to getting out. All my life revolved around that date. You play all kinds of weird games, calculating time. You're like, oh, I'm 13/15 or something, right? And all these silly games, just to kind of get your head through it. And I remember some of the older inmates would be like, getting out's gonna be really tough. And I was like, whatever, you're crazy. He's like, I could imagine how people would go back. It seemed crazy to me because it sucked in there. Why would you want to go back? And but then you get out, and it's and then you weirdly miss stuff because it's it's that vestigial culture within a culture. There's actually community in there because it's us versus them in a way that's so stark and satisfying in this deep human level. But then you get out, and it's there's all these. You have a parole officer. I actually had parole officers and probation officers because I switched states, so I had so many people, and they used to you come outside, and I was on a curfew, and it was a curfew in the morning too, so you couldn't leave until a certain time in the morning. Remember, I went out on my porch to go to the gym once. This guy was sitting there watching me. I just went back in, and I don't know. And then it's really expensive to be on parole and probation, and expensive to be in prison. And you only get paid 13 cents an hour. Technically, prisoners are slaves based on the, I think, 14th Amendment. Is they ended slavery, except they have an except in there. It's cute. But and so you get out though. There's all this money. There's all these rules on you. They put this thing that smells your breath on your ankle, and you got to pay for it. You got to pay for everything. And so, I mean, for a while, it was almost maybe $700 a month just in supervision fees and other costs like that, and then that's on top of your rent or something, and so it was really difficult. And there's just so many different fees, and then if you have restitution on top of that and other stuff, and you even get they bill you for all of it, and so and then if you fail to pay, they'll put you back in, and they do all kinds of I don't know, lots of little stuff like this. So it's really difficult. But then also on the cultural side, when you're in prison, it's it's weird. If people disrespect you, you have to fight them, right? It sucks. It's terrible. But Like, and then you get outside, and then people like walk behind you. And I just like, for a long time, I couldn't have people walk behind me. I'd like pull off the sidewalk and be like, what the fuck? You walking behind me? And it was like, they were just like, what? I was just walking, so sorry. You know, because they're just normal people, right? Or in grocery stores, really tough for prisoners. I don't know why. It's like really tough, all the options and stuff. And so that's all that stuff. So it's like the cultural transition. A lot of guys, like in prison, people see you, like everyone sees everything in prison. It's kind of terrifying, actually. It's like the ultimate it's like tribal totalitarianism or something, right? Makes me think maybe living in a tribe wasn't so great, actually. But because like everyone would see you, but then you get in prison, outside of prison, no one sees you, right? No one sees anyone, right? Because everyone's looking at screens or whatever, doing their thing. And so it's really hard, and you almost get lonely and like miss all the psychopaths you were sleeping with before. And so it's really tough, and like I don't know, man, you can always go back, so.
Well, it has been my honor to ask these questions, and now one of ASU's other grand graduates is going to get questions from the audience.
Do you think I could do a brief reading before we do that, just really quickly? That's okay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry. I'm going to do a little reading. Last Iron City event, I did do a reading. It was a little bit of a fervor, so I had to do a reading this time to satisfy people. Lovely wife is getting us set up there, and I've never done a comic reading, so I'm going to read the introduction first and then read the first few pages to try to go fast. So first I dedicated, there's one more professor I got to thank, which is my mom, Jenny Cronenfeld, a sociology dedicated to Mom, who wrote me every day, and she did. And it honestly almost got me stabbed once, because people, they don't always have great relationships with their mom in there. But, dear readers, in the land of the free, nearly 2 million people are locked away in prisons or jails. The U.S. has the largest prison population of any country, the highest incarceration rate, and holds over a fifth of the world's imprisoned people, despite representing only 4.25% of the global population. Moreover, when factoring in people on probation and parole, the number of unfree individuals in the U.S. rises to roughly 6,410,000. That's all cited. I intended to write a critique of this carceral state, the injustice of the criminal justice system, and the crime that is mass imprisonment in the U.S., but I failed. Instead, I wrote a story about a man who makes bad choices, who lets his anger, desire, and ego run rampant, destroying himself and hurting everyone around him in the process. When he finally tries to change, he does so in a bad place where there are no good options. I ended up writing a weird personal story about surviving prison and taking the first steps on the long road to redemption. It's an imperfect story about an imperfect life, but it's mine, warts and all. I don't ask for your sympathy. Honestly, I earned my punishment, and strange as it is to say, prison is the best thing that ever happened to me, because without prison, I never could have become the man I am today. I don't think prison is good, and I'm not saying it's good for others, but it was good for me despite all the pain. Is my story a defense of prison? I hope not. But I'm not sure if it's a critique either. Maybe it's a mistake, maybe it's a confession, maybe it's as meaningless as $80,000 in cash, but no one to spend it with. It's not a story about strength or how tough I am. It's a sad story about how weak I was. And I'm going to read you the first few pages. I'm a bad dog. As the chemicals and delusions faded, that awful truth came to focus. I was a drug dealer who hurt people, including ones I loved. My sentence was 28 months. With good behavior, I could be out in 2 years. Good behavior wasn't my strong point. Turn around, bend over, and cough. Maybe I'd never get out. Maybe I'd die in here. Oh, look at the new pup, he's mine. Welcome to hell, bud. Fresh meat. Maybe I deserved to. There was a letter. Mom hoped I'd mend my ways and come home. Maybe I could become a writer like I always talked about. I grabbed the soft, rubbery pen and flashed back to my first arrest. Cops viciously attack a peaceful protest. I was 18. Over that weekend in jail, a spark of rage smoldered in my heart. At an anarchist meeting, a mysterious woman advocated for direct action, a fancy name for property destruction. Like kindling, her words flared my spark into an inferno. Protests do nothing. We have to up the ante. We shoplifted dinner and made out in her minivan. You're a genius. I'll meet you there with some friends. She suggested planning something big for Buy Nothing Day. I had an idea. Some friends and I started to cement shut the entrance to our city's largest mall, Fashion Square. Okay. Where are the anarchists? They'll be here. Hands up! Open and shut case. Nice work, detective. My cellie finally returned from his meeting with the psychologist, who decided what prison we went to next. I'm Lobot. Before you ask, I got shot during a big deal. I clicked up with the crazy woodpecker gang. I told the shrink I want to wear his intestines. You think that's bad? Well, it's probably not good. The next morning. Hey, you know why they call me Spark Plug? Mommy tried to abort you with jumper cables? No, bitch, because I start shit. The guard peppered sprayed all of us. That night, as my eyes burned and a faceless woman haunted my nightmare, something woke me. You let him call you a bitch. Who gives a fuck? You if you want to live. Life or death. It was my choice. I chose life and sleepless nights. Thank you.
All right, we have like 5 minutes or so for some Q&A. So if anyone has questions, I'll walk over and hand you the mic.
My dad, do you have a question, Dad? I feel like you always have questions, so. Put him on the spot.
Not so much a question as another story. You know, you had an experience with someone who almost helped with pain. I saw you here, and that was a tough business for you. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that cross world.
Yeah, a real good buddy inside, real good buddy. Guy named Burns, who had a real tough break. You know, he had a kind of thing you never wish happens to you, and then he ended up in there, and he really did deserve to be in there. And he was a buddy of mine, but he got all messed up by getting arrested, and then his time in there, it's real tough. And he came out and visited me and stayed with me for a couple months. And he was feral, man. Like, you just kind of go feral in there. And I was trying to help him, but he just, he had done everything right in his life. And then so getting to the prison was real tough for him. He couldn't, make sense of it. And I ended up having to kind of get rid of him. So I had a friend who dealt with a lot of ne'er-do-wells like myself, and he said I just had to give him my sleeping bag and go drop him off somewhere with some cash. So I did that. I brought him up to Sedona, and I gave him my bunch of backpacking gear and $100 in cash, which was a lot to me back then. I was working at a bookstore. You don't make a lot of money doing that. And I dropped him off just because I couldn't, because he was going to get me in trouble if I stayed down there. And I just did not want to go back. And I really tried. I tried to help him as much as I could, but there's only so much you can do, And I dropped him off, and a week later he stabbed someone over like a $2 beer and went back. And it was really, really sad. I don't know. He was like a computer coder. He was a really, really smart guy. And I don't know. He went back in. I could never find him again. So that was real sad. I don't know. It's a real sad story.
I'm curious as to what your favorite or least favorite prison movie is.
Ooh, good question. I I guess my favorite, and it was sort of a detriment to me, is I love Cool Hand Luke. Like, is like the coolest. Who's cooler than Paul Newman? And I watched that movie like 5 times before I went to prison, and then I watched it in prison, which is a real mind fuck. I don't know if I can say that, but it was a real, like, to watch it in prison and like, you know, like the faceless guard with the glasses at the end. That's like God. It's like, that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. I really like that. And I guess my least favorite is Ocean 11s, because it's like, Julia Roberts was not waiting for me.
So the title is Dog Years. Does time progress differently for the inmates versus the corrections officers?
You got it. You got it. So dog years, basically the title is like, in time, you age in dog years. I kind of feel like I'm like 55 or something after doing my time in there. And it feels like every, you know, because it's like, it's not months. What they say is months aren't hard, seconds are hard. And you know, because a lot of guys, they count their like months, their days, their minutes, their seconds, their hours. And you're like, this weird thing, you're like, oh, 536.7, that's how many said, you know, it's like you have weird associations with numbers. And yeah, so it was definitely, it was about, you know, like, you know, 7 to 1 dog years. I guess it's not scientific, but that's what we used. So, yeah. Thank you.
I think a spin-off book should be called Dog Years, Chasing Tales. Tales.
Guys, pretty good, pretty good. I got lucky.
Autumn 2025, right here.
And I don't know if this is appropriate. Could I ask if you would mind asking a question? Would that be terrible? Okay, I'd like. I'm gonna put you on blast. I'm so sorry. Diana Gabaldon walked in. That's why I lost my breath earlier mid question. Yeah, just give her a clap. Come on. You gotta be good.
The only thing that comes to mind is, do you still do dope yourself?
Yes, but it's legal. It's legal now. So, yeah, even actually before this, hearing it. Yeah, hearing it. I was terrible in the courtroom, as you can tell. So.
I'm trying to think of something better than that, with a little more warning. What kind of recreation did you have in prison, other than doing yoga in the yard?
Oh, there's a lot. We did a lot of weightlifting. They call it, when you weightlift, you're in a car. So you get in a car with someone when you're weightlifting, because then it's like, there's a lot of politics of weightlifting. Because also, like, I don't even know what to tell you. Like, one thing they do to new inmates is they go and they have you work out and get you really, really tired. And then later that night, they all come and visit you when you're all exhausted. That didn't happen to me, thank goodness. But that was what I heard about a lot. But anyways, that's not, so I did a lot of reading. I read a lot. I honestly feel like people read more in prisons than in universities these days.
I bet.
No, and yoga, working out. You walk in circles a lot, or ovals. People said circles, they're really ovals. But I don't know, running. I used to run a lot, just in circles, though, of course. And but a lot of reading. I read a lot in there, and just a bunch of amazing books. Like Sometimes a Great Notion was one that really helped me a lot, because it had a whole thing about how like real strength is like knowing you're weak, right? I don't know, and it was like kind of a penultimate moment. There's just a bunch of books. Kurt Vonnegut there, so many great books, and yeah, I don't know. It was like you understand how magical books were when they were the only entertainment, you know. And yeah, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, I was wondering, did you start writing while you were in prison, or?
I sort of was a dilettante pretending I was a writer before it. I used to say,
start somewhere.
when I take the train across country with a bunch of herb, and I would tell people I was a writer going to meet with a publisher in New York, because that's obviously my sublimated fantasy, I now realize, of course. And I realized, like, if I was so ballsy to go smuggle drugs to New York, I should have been ballsy enough to just write a book. But I didn't quite have the discipline. There's nothing like being locked in a room for 2 years. But so I really started writing hard. I had that workshop, it was right around Portland. I got my first little thing published, which was kind of amazing to me. And I worked a lot. I worked every day. I was in there writing, and it saved me, it protected me from a lot of the politics when dudes wanted to kind of weren't too happy with me. Other guys would be like, no, that dude's doing his thing. You leave him alone. And I've had it's just crazy because I had some of the guys, I remember this guy Jerry I knew in there, who I probably shouldn't use his name, but he was, he had been in the Aryan Brotherhood in California. He was actually a sergeant in arms, which is the second in command, and then he left. That's a white power day. He left it in prison, which is not easy because it's normally a death sentence. And they sent 5 torpedoes to kill him. It's like a Greek myth or something. And he beat the brakes off of every single. His hands were like just mallets. God, I'm glad he never punched me. And he used to come and write to his wife with me. And he'd share his chew with me, and I felt so cool when he shared his chew with me. And it was just, he was the toughest dude I ever met. But he left that life and he turned it around. And even though he was in there, he tried to be good to everyone in there, not judge people. And it's just weird. You meet a lot of weird guys that you wouldn't think. I don't know. It's like the random kindness and the random violence. It's very, a lot to think about. But I remember, I don't know. I just remember him and I was reading sometimes a great notion. I was thinking he's such the embodiment of strength. It's just knowing your weakness. And I remember he had been in prison for 20 years. He got out. For 10 years, he's doing totally good. And someone insulted his wife. And he just beat him to death with his bare hands. And then he just sat on the sidewalk and smoked until they arrested him. He didn't even try to run. So be polite to people. That's my advice.